We were looking at Aslan, the tiger from Narnia. And I don't know if any of you have seen it or remember the movie, but Aslan still looked like a digital tiger or a lion. And it was incumbent upon us to sort of convince Aang that we could actually do it. Bill Westenhofer and Eric DeBoer from Rhythm and Hues, we all sat down and sort of talked about what are the defining characteristics of a CG tiger. And Rhythm and Hues does wonderful fur and wonderful creatures. The thing is they had never done a creature that did not talk. So this was an opportunity for them to prove to the world they could do an animal that didn't talk. So what we really started to notice with the CG tiger was that the animation had to come from the paws and the articulation of the light through the eyes. And one of the things that we constantly had to work with Aang on was he kept looking at the tiger and he kept saying, that tiger is not real. It's not performing the way it's supposed to perform. And he never always had a clear and defining way of what this tiger was, but he would say, I need it to be spiritual, I need it to be powerful. So that was the next trick. So we spent countless of hours photographing tigers, filming tigers, studying tigers in zoos in order to come up with the performance of Richard Parker. Sometimes we would actually take footage that we filmed and recreate that tiger for this performance, and Aang would look at it and say, it's still not real enough. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. The sequence is, to me, is fantastic. One of the things I'd also like to point out is the use of 3D in this sequence in particular. If you've seen the film, we shot this 185. This sequence was 235. Simply for the sole creative purpose, which I found out that later on that Oz copied us, was we wanted to break the frame and use the fish leaping out to sort of appear out in front of the audience. And I think that's about it. I mean, it's a lovely sequence. So I mean, if there's anything else, I'd be happy to answer questions. Or are we going into the next clip?
Well, I'd like to ask you one question.
Sure.
First, is that you've sort of the expert in some of these areas. You've worked on Smurfs and Pirates, and you're working on Jurassic Park 4 now. And you've just talked a little bit about the specific challenges with Pi, but was there anything groundbreaking that was done on Pi that you'd never done before and had to figure out? I mean, you're talking a bit about the tiger, the eyes, and the fur, but was that the biggest challenge, or what were the biggest challenges on this particular film?
Well, I would say that the 3 rules of production are don't shoot with kids, don't shoot with animals, and don't shoot in water. And then we added a 4th problem, which was shoot this in 3D. We used Pace camera and rigs with the Alexa. This was the version of the Alexa before the Alexa M. So we were shooting the codecs. So in many respects, the 3D, which was groundbreaking at the time, is now sort of an archaic pipeline, and it's rather amusing to look at the pipeline now because I would never recommend going back to that. The inherent challenges here, as you'll see, we had every single challenge thrown in the sequence, which was the boat, the kid, and the tiger. There is one shot in the sequence where we have a live tiger. I won't tell you which one, but those are the sort of the groundbreaking techniques. The tiger himself is indeed groundbreaking in that no animal had ever. We'd started working on what is called sub-scattering lighting inside of the eyes. We worked on a muscle definition that went over the muscle or the bone structure of Richard Parker. And then what's hard to explain is that we had over 200 animators working on the tiger itself. We had people who animated the whiskers, various sections of the fur in order to create various emotional states. Amusingly enough, we had a kid in Taiwan whose sole job it was to animate his testicles. So
Wow.
it's, in that sense, yes.
That's good for the CV, I think.
Quite groundbreaking.
Okay.
Probably one of the more proud compliments we had was, one of our last focus groups. They saw the movie in both 2D and 3D, and they said at the end of the day, this movie is so much better in 3D. It was intended to be seen in 3D, and it was great to see that audiences recognize that there is a difference, or can be a difference, between 2D and 3D. So with that.
That's absolutely stunning to hear you talk about all the work that went into that. Thank you.
So this is the final version that's in the movie, but you'll see a visual effects breakdown that'll show you some of the tricks that we did. I'd like to sort of note that while R&H was instrumental in the boat, and R&H is Rhythm and Hues, MPC Vancouver was largely responsible for this sequence. They did an incredible job with their work. Guillaume Rocheron, Christian Robert, and Genevieve West, and Randy Shore, and I'm going to butcher his name, but Hamish Schumacher. They spent countless of hours with water sims using Scanline's, I think, water flow program in order to generate the water. So what you're seeing here is a partial set, which was on a gimbal. We exceeded the laws of physics here and cheated with a lot of some wires and cablings in order to create a movement of this boat. You'll see that Surge is tied to a rope, and we had a lot of water spraying around back and forth. This is what a water sim looks like, and now it's rendered. We had to do almost 80 different types of sims on the water in order to create the realistic look to it. We really broke another rule here, which is this is day one of photography, and it's probably the hardest work. So the best way to start shooting a movie is do what's the most complicated. The boat itself, being on a motion-based gimbal, what we did was we found that the gimbal wasn't reacting to the water sims, so for the final film, we actually replaced the entire boat in order to be able to extend the full boat here. So we just have Pi. All that's an entirely digital shot, and then with those sailors falling in, we can come back to that because there's a discussion of convergence on that particular shot that's of note to 3D. Now here we finally built an underwater 3D rig, Pete Zuccarini who did it, so that we literally dove into the water. We added obviously the rest of the elements in here, and Suraj spent a couple months training in order to be able to hold his breath under the water here. So you see the first pass is tracking, then we sort of find out where all the creatures go, we put in the creatures. The creatures were supplied by Rhythm and Hues. Then we rendered everything into the shot, added a lot of bubbles, and you'll see at the end here, Ang really wanted this to be this sort of moment where a subconscious reaction opens Pi up to an alternate reality, and so we added this intense series of bubbles to come at you, basically. Not necessarily as a 3D gimmick, but sort of this 3D moment that was supposed to be very expressive for him. This is a previs. Ang was very deliberate in his previs, so we were very specific, and I think Ang is one of the only directors with whom I've worked that shot one for one, and we used the previs in order to literally tell the crew, here's what we're going to shoot, here's how we're going to shoot it. This is all, obviously this is all on the gimbal stage. That's what the water looks like before it's rendered. So now you're seeing that's the original plate. You can kind of see the set back there, and you see the crew. And then we started to roto everything out, roto the wires out, clean everything up, prep the plates, and we prepped the 3D plates in triage, which is before it went into shot production, so that we could make sure that all the plates were properly aligned. We did something unusual, which is that we called our dominant or hero eye the eye that was shot through the glass, and we slaved all our ride eyes to that eye, which is traditionally, people work the opposite way. And we did it because we found that we could capture light nuances and reflection nuances off the glass that were more interesting than the plates that were shot not through the glass. So this is post-viz. So once we shot this sequence, we then went in and we had a company, Halon, who added all the backgrounds for us so that we could use that in the cut and determine the length, timing, and the emotional resonance of the scene. This scene was very critical for Ang, and originally clocked in at somewhere near 15 minutes. We cut it down to like 10 and a half, 12 for the final release. Now, in this sequence, part of the water, Ang was very, Ang wanted us to create what he kept calling white water and clear water, or transparent water, which is water that is thick, voluminous, and yet transparent. Because he wanted the water to be very aggressive, and he wanted it to feel weighty, as if it were drowning people. The problem is that in visual effects, when you're creating a water sim, we would have sometimes up to 25 machines working several weeks just to render a single sim, and we would only be able to do them 2 feet deep. And Aang was asking for water depths up to 16 feet. So again, we had to go back in and do some tricks to hide the fact that we could only go 2 feet. But some of the shots worked to Aang's satisfaction, and we have a couple in there, just to be honest, that Aang, I'm sure, would still say, I want the water to be more transparent. Here we have the sinking of the ship. So there you can kind of see what the tank in Taiwan looks like. This is the first pass with rendered. This is our first sim to water. This is what the water starts to look like. You can kind of see the wave breakers in the background in order to create swells. One of the reasons we decided to shoot natively in 3D was that in doing some tests early on between conversion and native, Aang was not happy with the way the converted wave swells looked. He felt that they lost dimensionality and volume in the conversion process. So we were very careful to make sure that in shooting 3D, we captured the volume of the swells. And unfortunately, the original tank wasn't able to create 3-foot swells because Aang wanted 6-foot or 6-meter swells originally, and then we had to convince him that meters is not as good as 6 feet. So we created these jagged teeth on one side of the tank that allowed us to break up the water, and with these pistons, we started generating swells 3 to 5 feet. And in doing so, we were able to capture the volume of water in 3D that Aang really wanted. So this was these are interesting exercises. Rhythm and Hues created the tiger and the zebra, and then we would have to give that tiger and that zebra the animation to MPC Vancouver, and they would simulate the water interaction around the animals, and then once it was simmed, deliver that sim back to R&H so that they could animate the fur so that it reacted to the water correctly, and then sent the final animation back to MPC for the final composite. Now, when I was on Pirates, we were never, all our underwater photography was done with a 2D camera because there were no 3D housings at the time. This was one of the first examples of 3D water or underwater housing, where we shot Surge inside an underwater tank. You can kind of see it here. It was 20 meters deep. He trained for approximately 8 months in order to be able to hold his breath for about 2 minutes. So this is an entire practical shot with him. He never broke the plane. So then, obviously, as you can see, we added water up on top. We simulated the waves above, added the boat, and we used the red lights in order to try and create interactive light on Surge in order for so we capture the red. Now in post, what was interesting was Aang started to feel that he wanted to change the color dynamics inside of this underwater sequence because he wanted to have this sort of underwater, above water, darkened emotional state, sort of an emotional state of abandonment. So we started color changing the water and the ship in order to be able to tie it with the surface of the water. So here's a very tricky shot, subtle, which is this wave. Aang wanted this to be done in one shot, which is Pai gets to the boat, he's trying to climb on, and a giant wave pushes him onto the boat. We couldn't do it in one take. We had to do it in 2, and he was never happy, so we had to come up with a CG solution. And so you'll see in between these 2 plates, if you look very carefully, you'll see a wave and a large volume of CG water that wipes right on top of him in order to create that blend right here. Sort of cheat the illusion that it's one shot. We literally did like almost 16, 17 takes over 2 days to try and get this. It just never worked. Aang is not one to give up, which is a testament to how this movie actually got made. So this is a very simple composite here. Now, interesting 3D note about this sequence. Aang had a very he had a philosophy about 3D going into the movie, and he shot the movie with a series of rules that he thought would emotionally tell the story. And as he started to learn the language of 3D and understand 3D, we started to correct a lot of the 3D in these shots for final release. And I think it was a journey in many respects for Aang, because he was introduced to 3D as a set of rules, and he intently, with specific intent, looked to not only break them, but also to rewrite them. But he didn't know what the impact was or where it was going to go. And in the end, as we started finishing the movie, we began to change the 3D in order to create something that was a bit more specific to this film.